I never expected that a broken ladder, a sudden fall, and 180 pounds of handsome cowboy pinning me to the barn floor would change my life forever. But looking into Adrian's eyes as our lips accidentally brushed, I knew I was never going back home. The world seemed to disappear around us. The scent of fresh hay filled the air, dust floating lazily through the golden sunlight pouring in from the cracks of the old wooden barn. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain Adrian could hear it. His warm breath brushed against my face while neither of us dared move. For a split second, neither of us cared that I had nearly fallen from a 20-foot ladder. Neither of us cared that we were lying tangled together on the barn floor. All I could see were his blue eyes. Eyes that had slowly become the safest place I'd ever known. Our lips had only barely touched. An accident. Or maybe, something we both secretly wanted for days. The moment stretched endlessly before reality finally caught up with us. But before I tell you what happened next, I have to tell you how I ended up on a lonely ranch in the middle of nowhere with the most stubborn handsome cowboy I'd ever met. Because none of this was supposed to happen. Not to me. My name is Julian Carter. I'm 25 years old, and until 2 weeks earlier, my life had been painfully ordinary. I lived in the city, worked a boring office job that paid just enough to cover rent, and spent most evenings convincing myself I was happy. The truth? I wasn't. Every morning felt exactly like the one before it. Wake up. Commute. Sit behind a computer for 8 hours. Come home exhausted. Repeat. Friends kept telling me I was still young and had plenty of time to figure life out. Maybe they were right. But it didn't stop me from feeling like I was watching someone else's life instead of living my own. That weekend, I'd driven 3 hours to attend a family gathering at my aunt's house. It was loud. Chaotic. Full of cousins chasing each other through the backyard while older relatives asked the same questions they'd asked every year. So, seeing anyone? When are you getting a better job? Have you thought about buying a house? By sunset, my social battery was completely drained. I hugged everyone goodbye, climbed into my aging silver sedan, and began the long drive back toward the city. At first, everything was peaceful. Country roads stretched endlessly ahead. Golden fields swayed gently beneath a fading orange sky. The radio played softly while I rolled down the windows, letting cool evening air wash away the stress of the day. It almost felt perfect. Then the weather changed. The horizon darkened with alarming speed. Gray clouds swallowed the last traces of sunlight. A distant rumble echoed across the open fields. I frowned. That wasn't in the forecast. Another rumble. Closer this time. Within minutes, the first heavy raindrops splattered against my windshield. Then another. Then dozens. The peaceful drive transformed into chaos almost instantly. Rain hammered the roof so violently it sounded like handfuls of gravel being thrown against the car. The windshield wipers struggled desperately to keep up. Visibility shrank to almost nothing. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Come on. Lightning split the sky. For one brilliant second, the empty countryside lit up like daylight. Then darkness swallowed everything again. The storm only grew worse. Wind shoved my little sedan from side to side. Tree branches whipped across the road. Water pooled across the cracked pavement faster than my tires could push through it. I slowed to barely 30 miles an hour. Even that felt too fast. My phone displayed one lonely bar of signal before disappearing completely. No. I tried calling roadside assistance anyway. Call failed. Of course. I was officially stranded in the middle of nowhere. Then came the sound every driver dreads. A loud pop. The engine sputtered. The dashboard lit up with warning lights. My stomach dropped. You're kidding. The car lurched forward once. Twice. Then everything went silent. I coasted onto the muddy shoulder as rain pounded against the windows. I turned the key again. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. Only the pathetic clicking of a dying engine. I leaned back in my seat and sighed. This can't be happening. Outside, the storm raged harder than ever. Getting out wasn't an option. Walking in this weather could be dangerous. There were no houses in sight. No passing cars. Nothing. Just darkness. Rain. An endless empty land. For nearly 20 minutes, I sat there hoping another vehicle would appear. None did. Lightning flashed again. This time something caught my eye. Far off in the distance. A tiny flicker of warm yellow light. At first I thought I imagined it. Another flash of lightning confirmed it. There. On top of a gentle hill. A building. Maybe a farmhouse. Maybe a ranch. Either way, it was my only chance. Grabbing my backpack, I pulled my hood over my head and stepped into the storm. The rain soaked me instantly. Cold water dripped into my eyes while thick mud clung to my shoes with every exhausting step. Wind fought against me the entire climb. More than once, I wondered if I should turn back. But each time I looked up, The warm glow from those distant windows reminded me someone might actually be there. Someone who could help. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 15 minutes, I finally reached the weathered wooden porch. The house looked old, solid. A wraparound porch surrounded it, and beyond the house I could barely make out several barns, wooden fences, and the silhouettes of horses standing calmly despite the storm. Definitely a ranch. I hesitated before knocking. What if nobody answered? What if they didn't want strangers here? Another clap of thunder answered my thoughts. I raised my hand and knocked firmly on the heavy wooden door. What? Twice. Then I waited. For several long seconds. Nothing happened. I started to believe the house was empty. Then footsteps echoed from inside. Slow, steady, confident. The lock clicked. The door opened. Standing before me was the most handsome cowboy I'd ever seen. And in that moment, neither of us realized that one unexpected knock during a violent storm was about to change both of our lives forever. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rain poured off the brim of my hood, dripping onto the worn wooden porch. My shoes squelched in the mud, and I suddenly became painfully aware of how ridiculous I must have looked standing there, completely soaked, shivering, and clutching a backpack like it was the only thing keeping me together. The man in the doorway studied me with calm blue eyes. He was tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled the doorway. A faded denim shirt hugged his athletic frame, its sleeves rolled to his forearms. His jeans were dusty from work, and a worn leather belt carried a large silver buckle that caught the light spilling from the house behind him. His dark blonde hair looked slightly damp, as if he'd only recently come in from the rain. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice deep but surprisingly gentle. I swallowed. I'm really sorry to bother you." Another gust of wind nearly blew the words away. "My car broke down about a mile from here. I don't have any signal and I didn't know where else to go." His eyes drifted past me toward the road hidden beyond the darkness. "That old county road?" I nodded. "It finally gave out?" "I think the engine did." He let out a quiet sigh before stepping farther into the doorway. "This storm isn't letting up anytime soon." For another second he simply looked at me. Then his expression softened. "Get inside before you freeze." Relief washed over me. "Thank you." The warmth of the house hit me the second I crossed the threshold. It smelled of fresh coffee, burning firewood, and something delicious cooking in the kitchen. I hadn't realized how cold I was until that moment. "You weren't kidding," the man said as he closed the door behind me. "You're soaked." I noticed. That earned the smallest hint of a smile. It transformed his face completely. "I'm Adrian." He offered his hand. I shook it. "Julian." His grip was firm, warm, and reassuring. "Nice to meet you, Julian. I wish it were under better circumstances." He chuckled. "So do I." Adrian disappeared down the hallway before returning with a thick towel. "Here." I gratefully wrapped it around my shoulders. "You've got good timing." "How so?" "If you'd shown up 10 minutes later, I probably would have been asleep. I guess luck finally decided to help me." "Maybe." His smile lingered for just a second before he nodded toward another room. "Come on. You need to warm up." The living room looked exactly how I'd imagined a ranch house would. Wooden beams stretched across the ceiling. A massive stone fireplace crackled with a comforting fire. Bookshelves lined one wall while family photographs rested on the mantel. A golden retriever lifted his head from a rug near the fireplace before lazily walking over. The dog sniffed my soaked jeans, then wagged his tail. "Looks like you've been approved," Adrian said. "I guess that's a good sign." "It is." He scratched behind the dog's ears. "This is Rusty." Rusty leaned against my leg as if we'd already been friends for years. "Well, hello there." The dog happily accepted the attention. "You hungry?" Adrian asked. I hadn't thought about food until he mentioned it. Now my stomach answered with a loud growl. He laughed. "I'll take that as a yes. I haven't eaten since lunch." Perfect timing. He disappeared into the kitchen while I stood near the fireplace, slowly feeling life return to my frozen hands. A few minutes later he returned carrying 2 steaming bowls. "I was making beef stew." He handed one to me. "I hope that's okay. It smells incredible." We sat at a sturdy wooden dining table. For several minutes, the only sounds were spoons against bowls and rain battering the windows. The stew was easily the best meal I'd had in months. "You're a good cook," I admitted. "My grandmother taught me." "You should thank her." "I do." There was something peaceful about the silence between us. It wasn't awkward. It simply was. Eventually Adrian broke it. "So what brings you out here?" I explained the family gathering, my drive home, and the sudden storm. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "You picked the worst night to travel." "I figured that out." You from the city? Yeah. I thought so. Is it that obvious? You keep looking out the window. I blinked. I do. He smiled. City people always do. And what does that mean? They're used to seeing other people. I looked through the rain-streaked glass. Outside there was nothing but darkness. You don't get lonely out here? His expression changed. For just a moment. Then it disappeared. Sometimes. It was a simple answer. But something about the way he said it stayed with me. After dinner, Adrian grabbed an old toolbox. I'll take a look at your car first thing tomorrow. You know how to fix engines? I know enough. You do everything around here? He shrugged. Kind of have to. No employees? Not anymore. That answer raised more questions than it answered. But something told me not to push. Instead, Adrian showed me to the guest room upstairs. It wasn't fancy. A wooden bed. A dresser. A rocking chair beside the window. A handmade quilt folded neatly across the mattress. It's not much, he said. It's perfect. He hesitated. I don't usually have guests. I appreciate this more than you know. He nodded once. If you need anything, my room's across the hall. Thank you, really. He started toward the hallway before stopping. Oh. He tossed me a folded flannel shirt and a pair of sweatpants. They'll probably be too big. I don't care. They're clean. You're saving my life. His smile returned. I think that's a bit dramatic. Maybe. But I'll still say thank you. You're welcome, Julian. The door clicked softly behind him. For the first time all evening I was alone. I changed into the borrowed clothes. They were far too large, but they were warm. As I climbed into bed, I noticed the rain finally beginning to ease. Sleep should have come quickly. Instead, my thoughts kept drifting back downstairs. To Adrian. There was something different about him. He didn't talk much. Yet every word felt genuine. He hadn't hesitated to help a complete stranger. He asked for nothing in return. In a world where everyone seemed to expect something, that kind of kindness felt almost unbelievable. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the bedroom window. I opened my eyes to birds singing outside. For a second I forgot where I was. Then the smell of fresh coffee drifted upstairs. I smiled. After getting dressed, I walked downstairs to find Adrian already outside feeding several horses. The morning sun painted the ranch in shades of gold. Rolling pastures stretched farther than I could see. Wooden fences divided the fields. A red barn stood proudly behind the house, while cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. It was breathtaking. Adrian looked over as I stepped onto the porch. Morning. Morning. He handed another bucket of feed to me. Want to help? I laughed. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. You'll learn. I've been here less than 12 hours. He grinned. That's enough time to start. I followed him into the pasture. The horses approached without fear. One large chestnut mare gently nudged my shoulder. I think she likes you. I hope so. She doesn't trust everyone. I carefully fed her. Her soft nose brushed against my hand. I've never been this close to a horse. They're smarter than people think. So are dogs. And cows. You really love this place. Adrian looked across the fields. I do. There was pride in his voice. But there was loneliness too. Before I could ask another question, the sound of thunder echoed faintly in the distance. Not another storm. Construction. Adrian frowned. The bridge. What bridge? The only bridge leading back to town. He pulled his phone from his pocket and frowned at the screen. The county finally updated the emergency notice. What does it say? The storm washed out half the bridge last night. My stomach sank. So, how long until it's repaired? He read silently for a moment, then looked back at me. At least 4 or 5 days. I blinked. And my car. I'll check it after breakfast. An hour later, Adrian closed the hood with a sigh. Well? The alternator's gone. That's bad, isn't it? It's not great. Can you fix it? I can. Relief flooded through me. But there it is. The replacement part won't arrive until the roads reopen. So I'm stuck. He leaned against the truck parked beside the barn. For a few days, I looked around the enormous ranch. The quiet. The open sky. The horses. The endless fields. It was nothing like my apartment back home. Nothing like my ordinary life. Adrian rubbed the back of his neck. You're welcome to stay here until everything's fixed. You sure? I've got plenty of room. He looked almost embarrassed admitting it. And he glanced toward the empty fields. It might be nice having someone around for a change. I smiled. I'd like that. Neither of us realized it then. But those few unexpected days on the ranch were about to become the beginning of a life neither of us had ever imagined. I had never imagined that being stranded could feel so peaceful. Back in the city, every day was measured by deadlines, traffic lights, and the constant buzz of notifications. Out here, the only thing that woke me each morning was the sunrise spilling across endless fields and Rusty scratching at my bedroom door, eager for his breakfast. 4 days. That's all it was supposed to be. 4 days until the bridge reopened, the replacement part arrived for my car, and I drove back to the life I'd left behind. At least that was the plan. The first full day passed quickly. After breakfast, Adrian handed me a pair of worn leather work gloves. "You'll need these." I turned them over in my hands. "You really think I'm capable of helping around here?" He looked at me with a grin. "I think everyone starts somewhere. I've never even touched a fence post. Then today's your lucky day." I laughed. "I have a feeling you're about to make me regret agreeing to this." "We'll see." The morning was spent repairing a section of fencing along one of the horse pastures. Or rather, Adrian repaired it. I mostly handed him tools. Occasionally, I held wooden boards in place while he hammered them together with practiced precision. Watching him work was almost mesmerizing. Every movement was confident. Every swing of the hammer landed exactly where it needed to. It was obvious he'd been doing this for years. Meanwhile, I somehow managed to hit my own thumb. Art. Ow. I dropped the hammer immediately. Adrian turned around. "You okay?" "I think I just broke every bone in my hand." He walked over, trying very hard not to laugh. "Let me see." I held out my hand dramatically. "It's definitely swollen." He gently turned it over, examining my thumb. His hands were rough from years of ranch work. Strong. Warm. After a few seconds he looked up. "You'll live." "That's your professional opinion?" "It is." I was hoping for more sympathy. "I could pretend it's worse if it'd make you feel better." "It might." He smiled. "You city boys are dramatic. We prefer the term expressive." He laughed. It was the first time I'd heard him laugh without holding back. It was surprisingly contagious. That afternoon, he introduced me to the rest of the ranch. The cattle. The chicken coop. The vegetable garden behind the house. Even the old red barn that stood at the edge of the property. "My grandfather built this place," Adrian said as we walked through the massive wooden doors. "It's beautiful. He started with nothing but 40 acres. And now, almost 600. I looked around in amazement. "This entire ranch belongs to you?" He nodded quietly. "My parents ran it after Grandpa retired." His voice softened. "When they passed away." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "I'm sorry." He stared across the empty barn for a long moment. "It was a few years ago. I know that doesn't make it easier." "No, it doesn't." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was respectful. Eventually Adrian spoke again. "I thought about selling." "What changed your mind?" He smiled faintly. "This place is home. I understand." "No." He looked around at the wooden beams above us. "I don't think you do." His words weren't cruel. Just honest. "I've lived here my whole life." He rested a hand against one of the old support posts. "Every fence has a memory. Every pasture. Every trail. I can't imagine leaving." For the first time in years, I found myself wondering what it felt like to belong somewhere that deeply. That evening we sat on the front porch with mugs of hot coffee. The storm had completely passed. The sky exploded with stars. I'd never seen so many. "You can't even see this in the city?" I whispered. Adrian leaned back in his rocking chair. "One of the perks. I think it's my favorite one." "You've only been here 2 days." "Exactly." He smiled. "So what about you? What about me? What made you choose an office job?" I laughed. "I didn't. No. It just happened." He waited. I sighed. "I studied business because everyone said it was practical. I graduated. I found a job. I kept getting promoted. Everyone told me I should be happy. Were you?" I looked out across the dark fields. "I kept trying to convince myself I was." Adrian nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." "You do." "I always thought I was supposed to be fine doing this alone." "Were you?" His answer came after several quiet seconds. "No." The conversations became longer after that. Every night we'd sit by the fireplace. Sometimes talking for hours. Sometimes saying almost nothing. Oddly enough, both felt comfortable. I learned Adrian loved old country songs because his mother used to sing while cooking dinner. He learned I secretly loved painting but hadn't picked up a brush in nearly 5 years. I told him about my tiny apartment. He told me about growing up chasing calves across muddy fields. I confessed I'd never ridden a horse. He stared at me in disbelief. "Seriously? I've lived in the city. That's no excuse." I think it is. He stood up. Tomorrow. What? You're learning. Oh, this should end well. The next morning Adrian saddled 2 horses. One massive black stallion named Midnight. One calm chestnut mare named Daisy. You'll ride Daisy. I appreciate your confidence. She's patient. I'll need more than patience. He adjusted the saddle before offering me his hand. Trust me. I looked at him. Then at the horse. Then back at him. If I fall, I'll catch you. For some reason, I believed him. The lesson started awkwardly. Very awkwardly. I climbed into the saddle completely wrong. Nearly slid off the other side. And somehow got my boot stuck. Adrian laughed so hard he had to lean against the fence. You're enjoying this far too much. I really am. You promised to teach me. I am teaching you. By laughing? Positive reinforcement. I don't think that's how that works. Eventually I managed to stay in the saddle. Barely. By the end of the hour, Daisy walked calmly around the pasture while I proudly stayed upright. I did it. You did. I didn't fall. Not once. I think that deserves a celebration. It deserves lunch. I'll take that too. That afternoon they worked side by side repairing old equipment. The easy conversations continued. The comfortable silences became even more natural. Without realizing it, I had started looking forward to every moment spent beside Adrian. The way he smiled when Rusty stole one of his gloves. The quiet morning he greeted me with every day. The way he'd always ask if I needed help before I had to ask. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He was simply kind. And kindness was becoming surprisingly difficult to walk away from. Late that evening, Adrian received a phone call from the repair shop. He listened quietly before hanging up. I looked up from the kitchen table. Good news? The alternator finally arrived. Really? He nodded. I can pick it up tomorrow morning. A strange feeling settled in my chest. I should have been excited. Instead, I felt disappointed. Because that meant my time here was almost over. Adrian seemed unusually quiet during dinner. Finally he set down his fork. Can I ask you something? Of course. If your car's fixed tomorrow? Yeah. Will you go straight back? I hesitated. I guess so. He nodded once. I figured. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then Adrian took a slow breath. I've been thinking. About what? He looked directly into my eyes. You've helped more around this ranch in a few days than you probably realize. I mostly handed you tools. You also fixed fences, fed horses, organized the workshop, and somehow convinced Rusty that you're his favorite person. I laughed. He definitely likes me. He does. Another pause. Then Adrian smiled nervously. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look unsure of himself. Julian? What if you didn't leave? I blinked. What? I mean, he rubbed the back of his neck. I could use the help around here. And his voice became quieter. It'd be nice having someone to talk to. I stared at him. Not because the offer sounded strange. Because a part of me had secretly hoped he'd ask. I don't know the first thing about ranching. I can teach you. My entire life is back in the city. Is it a life you actually want? The question caught me completely off guard. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure of the answer. Adrian continued. I'll pay you. You'll have a room. Meals. A fresh start. He smiled. And maybe you'll help make this place feel a little less empty. I looked out the kitchen window. The setting sun painted the ranch in shades of gold. The horses grazed peacefully in the distance. Rusty slept beside the porch. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I turned back toward Adrian. A smile slowly spread across my face. You know what? What? I'd like to give ranch life a try. Relief washed across his face so quickly that he couldn't hide it. Really? I nodded. If you'll have me. He extended his hand across the table. Welcome to the ranch, partner. I shook it firmly. Neither of us realized that accepting that handshake would change our lives forever. Because in just a few days, a broken ladder inside the old red barn would force us both to admit feelings we'd been trying very hard to ignore. The next week flew by faster than either of us expected. Every morning started before sunrise. Adrian would already be awake, brewing coffee while Rusty waited patiently by the back door. I'd stumble downstairs, still half asleep, and Adrian would greet me with the same quiet smile. Morning, partner. It became my favorite part of the day. After breakfast, we'd head out to work together. Some days we repaired fences. Other days we checked on the cattle or cleaned the horse stalls. Slowly I stopped feeling like a visitor. The ranch no longer seemed overwhelming. It began to feel familiar, and so did Adrian. One afternoon, we were repairing an old corral fence when I finally asked the question that had been on my mind for days. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian looked up from his hammer. "Sure. Why haven't you hired anyone before now?" He paused before answering. "I tried." "What happened?" "They usually stayed a few weeks. And then? They missed town. They missed their friends. They missed the noise." He shrugged. "This place isn't for everyone." I leaned against the fence. "Were you worried I'd leave too?" His smile was small. "I told myself not to get used to having you around. But I did anyway." His honesty caught me off guard. Neither of us spoke for a few moments. Instead, we simply returned to work. Yet something between us had changed. It wasn't dramatic. It was quieter than that. Like two people who no longer needed to pretend they were just passing through each other's lives. That evening after dinner, Adrian surprised me. "Come on. Where are we going?" "You'll see." He led me to the pasture where Midnight and Daisy were waiting. "We're riding?" "Just for a while." The sun was beginning to set as we rode across the ranch. Golden light stretched across the fields, making everything glow. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers. Neither of us hurried. There was no reason to. When we reached the highest hill on the property, Adrian stopped his horse. "This is my favorite place." I looked around. The entire ranch spread out beneath us. The barns, the pastures, the winding creek. Everything looked peaceful. "It's beautiful. My dad used to bring me here. When I was little." "What would you do?" "We'd sit here until the stars came out." He smiled softly. He always said you can tell a lot about a person by whether they're comfortable with silence. I glanced toward him. "And are you?" "I am now." Those 3 words stayed with me long after we rode back home. Over the following days we slipped into an easy rhythm. We laughed more, talked more. Sometimes we'd accidentally brush hands while carrying supplies. Neither of us pulled away immediately anymore. One afternoon, I found Adrian sitting alone on the porch after finishing the day's work. He looked unusually thoughtful. "You okay?" He nodded. "Just thinking." "About?" "You." I blinked. "Me?" He looked almost embarrassed. I haven't smiled this much in years. I wasn't sure what to say, so I sat beside him. For several minutes, we watched the sunset without speaking. Finally I smiled. "I'm glad I knocked on your door." "So am I." A few days later, Adrian decided it was finally time to repair one of the loft windows inside the old barn. "The frame's been loose for months," he explained. "If we don't fix it now, the next storm will tear it right out." I looked up. The window sat nearly 20 feet above the floor. "So?" He handed me a toolbox. "You want me to help?" "I'll work from below. You'll tighten the bolts from the inside." I stared at the tall wooden ladder. "You trust me?" "I do." "I'm not sure I trust me." He laughed. "You'll be fine." That confidence was enough to convince me. I climbed slowly. Each step creaked beneath my boots. Halfway up I looked down. "I officially regret volunteering." "You volunteered?" "I think you volunteered me." Adrian chuckled. "Just keep climbing." I reached the loft and carefully positioned myself beside the old window. "Okay. What now?" "There's a loose bracket on your left." "I see it." "Use the wrench." I began tightening the rusted bolts. It was awkward work. The ladder shifted slightly beneath me. "You all right?" Adrian called. "Yeah. I've got it." A few more turns. Almost done. Then I heard it. Crack. I froze. "Adrian?" "What?" I don't think that sound was good. The old wooden rung beneath my foot split in half. Before I could react, my balance disappeared. The ladder lurched violently. Oh. Everything happened at once. The toolbox slipped from my hands. Wrenches clattered through the air. The ladder tipped backward. I reached for the window frame. "Miss Julian." Adrian sprinted toward me. I was already falling. For one terrifying second, all I saw was the barn roof spinning above me. Then strong arms wrapped around my waist. Adrian caught me. But my momentum was too much. The force knocked both of us backward. We crashed together onto the thick pile of hay below. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs. For several long seconds, neither of us moved. I slowly opened my eyes. Adrian was lying directly on top of me. One arm still wrapped securely around my back. The other braced against the hay to keep his weight off me. His breathing was fast. Mine wasn't much better. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. "I don't think so." "You?" "I'm fine." Relief flooded his face. Neither of us seemed eager to move. Our faces were only inches apart. I could see every shade of blue in his eyes, feel the warmth of his breath. For days, weeks, we had danced around something neither of us wanted to name. Now there was nowhere left to hide. As we both tried to speak at the same time, our foreheads bumped gently. We laughed. The tension eased for only a second. Then, without meaning to, I tilted my head. At the exact same moment, so did Adrian. Our lips brushed together. Barely. An accident. Both of us froze. Neither pulled away. Instead, Adrian searched my face as though silently asking a question. I knew exactly what he meant. I answered by smiling. Very slowly. He leaned in again. This time it wasn't an accident. He kissed me gently, softly, as though he was giving me every chance to change my mind. I didn't. Instead, I lifted one hand to his shoulder and kissed him back. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It simply felt right. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us could stop smiling. Adrian let out a quiet laugh of disbelief. I've wanted to do that since the night you knocked on my door. I laughed softly. You picked an interesting moment. I know. I almost waited too long. I looked into his eyes. No. You kissed me at exactly the right time. Neither of us realized that our lives had just changed forever. Because after weeks of unspoken feelings, there was only one thing left to do. Tell each other the truth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The old barn was completely silent except for our breathing and the distant sound of horses shifting in their stalls. Adrian was still leaning over me, one hand pressed into the hay to support himself. His cheeks were slightly flushed. So, he said with a nervous laugh. So, I answered. I wasn't planning on kissing you while lying in a pile of hay. I smiled. I suppose most people aren't. He rubbed the back of his neck as he carefully helped me sit up. I've imagined saying how I felt 100 different ways. And none of them involved a broken ladder? Not even close. We both laughed. The laughter melted away the last of the awkwardness. Then Adrian's expression became serious. Julian, I need to tell you something. I nodded. I'm listening. He looked down at the hay for a second before meeting my eyes again. I started falling for you the night you knocked on my front door. The first night? He smiled sheepishly. You were standing there completely soaked. You looked exhausted. But you still apologized for bothering me. I remember thinking. He laughed quietly. That you were either the politest stranger I'd ever met or completely out of your mind. I might have been both. Probably. His smile softened. Every day after that, it became harder to imagine this ranch without you. When we fixed fences together. When we rode horses. When we stayed up talking by the fire. I realized something. What? I wasn't waiting for the roads to reopen anymore. I was hoping you'd find a reason to stay. His words settled warmly in my chest. I reached over and took his hand. You know, I've got a confession too. He looked at me expectantly. When my car broke down, I thought it was the worst thing that could have happened. And now, I glanced around the old barn. The sun streamed through the wooden slats, filling the air with dancing specks of dust. Rusty wandered in through the open doors and immediately flopped onto a pile of hay, as though he had been waiting for the conversation to end. I laughed softly. Now I think it was the luckiest day of my life. Adrian's smile grew wider. I've been trying not to fall for you. So have I. I failed. So did I. Without another word, we wrapped each other in a long, heartfelt hug. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It simply felt like two people who had finally stopped pretending. Life on the ranch changed after that. Not all at once. Slowly. Naturally. Every morning still began before sunrise. Only now breakfast came with more laughter. Adrian no longer worked in complete silence. He'd tell stories about growing up on the ranch while I attempted to cook pancakes that almost always came out misshapen. You call these pancakes? He teased one morning. I call them abstract art. They're shaped like Texas. I was aiming for circles. I can tell. Despite his teasing, he always ate every bite. The ranch itself seemed different too. Or maybe it was us. Repairing fences became less like work and more like spending time together. We raced each other across the pastures. I usually lost. Mostly because Adrian had been riding horses since he could walk. You cheated, I called one afternoon after he crossed the finish line first. I absolutely did not. You had a faster horse. I had better technique. I disagree. He laughed. Sounds like someone wants a rematch. I definitely want a rematch. You'll still lose. We'll see. One evening, while watching the sunset from our favorite hill, I finally asked something I'd been wondering about. Can I ask you a serious question? Always. Were you really okay living here alone all those years? Adrian looked toward the horizon. I convinced myself I was. But I'd forgotten what it felt like to share my life with someone. He reached over and gently intertwined his fingers with mine. This ranch never felt empty. I did. I squeezed his hand. You'll never be alone again. He smiled. I know. A week later, the repair shop called. My car was ready. I stared at my phone for several seconds after hanging up. Adrian noticed immediately. That was the garage? I nodded. They finished it. Silence filled the kitchen. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, Adrian broke it. So. You should probably go pick it up. I probably should. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I'll drive you. The next morning we drove into town together. The mechanic handed me my keys. Runs like new. Thanks. I climbed into my sedan and started the engine. It sounded perfect. Reliable. Ready to take me back to my old life. Adrian stood beside his truck. Hands in his pockets. Trying very hard not to look disappointed. I looked at the steering wheel. Then at the road leading toward the city. For the first time, it didn't feel like home. I shut off the engine. Stepped out. Walked over to Adrian. He looked confused. Everything all right? I held out the keys. I don't think I need these right now. His eyebrows lifted. What do you mean? I've spent years chasing a life I thought I was supposed to want. A better job. A bigger apartment. A busier schedule. But I've never been happier than I've been here. He stared at me. You mean that? I do. I smiled. If the job offer still stands. His face lit up instantly. It absolutely does. And I laughed. I'd like to keep your company too. He closed the distance between us and wrapped me in another hug. I'm really glad your car broke down. So am I. Over the next several months, I officially became part of the ranch. I learned how to repair fences without hitting my thumb. Mostly. I could saddle a horse in minutes. I even mastered driving the old tractor without stalling it every 50 feet. Adrian insisted that deserved a celebration. You only stalled twice today. I'm improving. You are. I might even be a real cowboy someday. He laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Autumn slowly gave way to winter. The ranch transformed beneath blankets of snow. Even then, life remained warm inside the old farmhouse. The fireplace crackled every evening. Rusty continued claiming the best spot in front of it. And somehow, every night ended with Adrian and me sitting together, grateful for the unexpected path that had brought us there. One snowy evening, I found the old notebook I'd packed before leaving the city. Inside was a list I'd written months earlier. 5-year plan. Get promoted. Move into a larger apartment. Buy a newer car. Work harder. Earn more. I smiled to myself. None of it mattered anymore. I quietly closed the notebook and tossed it into a drawer. Adrian walked into the room carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. What are you smiling about? I was just thinking. About what? Sometimes the best things in life happen because everything else goes wrong. He handed me a mug. I couldn't agree more. Months later, spring returned to the ranch. The fields turned green once again. Wildflowers bloomed along the fences. The horses grazed peacefully beneath bright blue skies. One afternoon we stood together outside the barn. The very same barn where a broken ladder had changed everything. I looked up at the brand new ladder leaning safely against the wall. You know. What? I still don't trust ladders. Adrian laughed. Neither do I. They have a habit of changing people's lives. He slipped an arm around my shoulders. I think this one did us a favor. I leaned comfortably against him. Looking across the ranch, I realized something. Home isn't always the place you come from. Sometimes. Home is the place where someone is waiting for you at the end of every day. A violent storm had stranded me on a lonely ranch. A kind cowboy had opened his door to a complete stranger. A simple job offer had given me a second chance at life. And a broken ladder had finally given us the courage to admit what our hearts had known all along. I never went back to the life I had left behind. Because everything I had ever been searching for was waiting for me on that quiet little ranch. Beside Adrian. The place I now proudly called home. A year passed faster than either of us expected. If someone had told me 12 months earlier that I'd willingly wake up before sunrise every morning, spend my days repairing fences, feeding horses, and driving an old tractor across 600 acres of ranch land, I would have laughed. Now, I couldn't imagine my life any other way. The ranch had become more than a place to live. It had become home. And Adrian, he had become my home too. The seasons came and went, each bringing something new. Spring covered the pastures with wildflowers. Summer filled the fields with golden sunlight that seemed to last forever. Autumn painted the trees in brilliant shades of red and orange. Winter blanketed everything in snow, turning the ranch into a quiet wonderland. No matter the season, one thing never changed. Every morning began together. Adrian always woke before me. I'd find him in the kitchen with coffee already brewing while Rusty waited hopefully for breakfast. "Morning," Adrian would say with the same warm smile that had greeted me on my very first day. "Morning. You sleep okay?" Like a rock. "Good." Simple conversations. Simple moments. They were the ones I treasured most. I had come a long way from the nervous city guy who didn't know the difference between a wrench and a socket. Now I could repair broken fences without supervision. I knew every horse by name. I could tell when one of the calves wasn't feeling well before anyone else noticed. Even the neighboring ranchers started treating me like one of their own. "You clean up pretty well for a city boy," one of them joked during a community barbecue. "I've had a good teacher." Adrian smiled from across the table. "He gives me too much credit." "I don't think I give you enough." One Saturday afternoon, we drove into town for the annual county fair. The fairgrounds buzzed with families, live music, food stands, and friendly competitions. Adrian greeted almost everyone by name. "You really know the whole county. When you grow up out here," he laughed, "everybody knows everybody." We spent the afternoon wandering through the exhibits. There were prize-winning vegetables, handmade quilts, horse demonstrations, even an old-fashioned pie contest. "You entering next year?" I teased. "I know my limits. I've had your cooking. So, let's just say your beef stew is much better than your pie." He laughed. "I'll stick to stew." As evening fell, fireworks lit up the sky. We stood together near the edge of the fairgrounds, watching brilliant colors burst overhead. "You know," Adrian said quietly, "I almost didn't come this year." "Why?" "I stopped enjoying things after my parents passed." He looked at the fireworks for a long moment. "I thought happiness was something I'd already had." He turned toward me. I didn't realize I still had more waiting for me. I slipped my hand into his. So did I. Back at the ranch, we decided to make a few changes. The old guest room became an art studio. One rainy afternoon, Adrian surprised me by carrying in a large wooden easel. I looked at him in confusion. "What's this?" "You told me you used to paint." "I haven't in years." "I know." He smiled. "I think you should start again." "You remembered that?" "I remember everything you tell me." I ran my hand across the smooth wood of the easel. "I don't even know what I'd paint." Adrian opened the curtains. Outside, the sun was setting over the pastures. Golden light stretched across the fields while Midnight and Daisy grazed peacefully near the creek. He smiled. "I think you've got plenty of inspiration." Before long, the studio filled with paintings of ranch life. The horses, the old red barn, Rusty sleeping by the fireplace. Even a portrait of Adrian sitting on the porch with his cowboy hat resting beside him. When I showed it to him, he stared at it silently. "You really see me like this?" "I painted exactly what I see." He looked at the portrait again before quietly saying, "It's the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me." Life wasn't perfect. Some days storms damaged fences. Some seasons brought drought. Equipment broke. Long days left us exhausted. But we faced every challenge together. That made all the difference. Whenever something went wrong, Adrian would simply smile and say, "We'll figure it out." And somehow, we always did. On the anniversary of the night we met, a familiar storm rolled across the countryside. Thunder echoed through the hills. Rain tapped gently against the farmhouse windows. I stood on the porch watching the weather roll in. Adrian joined me a moment later, handing me a mug of hot chocolate. "Looks familiar." "It does." He leaned against the porch railing. "Exactly 1 year ago, a stranger knocked on my front door. I remember being convinced you'd send me away. I never could have done that. You didn't even know me." "I didn't." "So why did you help?" He smiled thoughtfully. "My mom used to tell me something." "What?" "If someone finds their way to your door during a storm, they're there for a reason." I smiled. She was right. I think so too. We watched the rain together in comfortable silence. Finally, Adrian spoke again. "You know." "What?" "I'm still grateful your car broke down." I laughed. "I'm still grateful the storm happened." The next morning, the rain had cleared. The sky was a brilliant shade of blue. As we walked toward the barn to begin another day's work, I noticed something leaning against the wall. The old broken ladder. Adrian had never thrown it away. "You kept it?" He nodded. "I was about to burn it. But then I changed my mind." "Why?" He grinned. "It reminds me that sometimes the things that seem like disasters become the best moments of your life." I laughed. "I suppose falling off it worked out pretty well." "I'd say so." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. We stood together looking across the ranch. The horses grazed peacefully. Rusty chased butterflies through the tall grass. The farmhouse stood proudly beneath the morning sun. Everything felt exactly as it should. I thought back to the person I had been before the storm. Stressed, restless, always chasing the next promotion, always believing happiness was somewhere else. It turned out happiness wasn't waiting in a bigger city, or a better paying job, or a perfect plan. It was waiting behind the door of an old farmhouse at the end of a muddy country road. Waiting in the kindness of a cowboy who opened his home to a stranger. Waiting in shared breakfasts, quiet sunsets, and long days of honest work. Most of all, it was waiting in the life we built together. Sometimes people spend years searching for where they belong. I found it by accident. One violent storm. One broken down car. One generous cowboy. And one broken ladder that changed everything. Looking back now, I wouldn't change a single moment, because I never went home. I found a better one. The end.